Next, reality. First, the bad. Keeping up with a scratch-inspired diet or a scratch diet in general is very difficult. It started off kind of easy in the beginning because I did cook and bake for a living, so making a lot of dishes and being creative is not new to me. That said, I still work full time. Eventually, I struggled to keep up with a scratch diet because I had an inconsistent, wonky schedule. At the time, I did not work from, let's say, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I typically worked 60 to 70 hours a week, usually at 4 a.m. And if I was lucky, I got out at about 4 p.m. And then sometimes I'd have to do like I forgot what they call it, but essentially you go back in the next day at to close, let's say, from 9 to 6. Clopenings, there we go. I did a lot of clopenings. You go to work at 9 to 6, and you have to be at work again at 3 or 4 the next day in the morning. And so I dealt with this very impossible schedule with no weekends, no holidays, no sense of consistency, didn't have the same days off or the same days to work on a weekly basis. So in order to help me deal with this, I started out baking 2 to 4 loaves of bread at a time so that I could freeze half of them and use them later within the same month. So I could choose let's say I had a Wednesday off. I could bake 4 loaves of bread and then I would have at least 1 loaf a week after that. This worked until I started preferring to spend my days off doing other things. When I was a full-time baker, I obviously had to make sure that my bakes fit the restaurant and the bakery's standards. So they had to be a certain weight. So you had to make sure your ingredients were on point. You can't have any kind of cross-contamination, right? So when I started doing this at home, however, I went from trying to get the perfect rise and the perfect score technique down to just saying, fudge it. My bread undoubtedly got uglier. Look at this mess. I just didn't care. My primary goal just became, is it edible? Can I put butter on it? Will it hold jam? I am so sorry, tartine fans, but fancy holes don't hold butter. I even found myself neglecting my sourdough starter often, but luckily for me, I can neglect it for a whole year and she'll come back to life with one good feeding and one good cleaning. Her name is Winnie. She's over 5 years old now and she still bakes fantastic bread, with or without holes. After forcing myself to cook this way for an entire year, time became my most precious resource. I learned how to manage time very well. I also learned how to just let certain expectations go. A pie or cake a week or bi-weekly just stopped being the norm. It became just bread, and then the bread started to become a nuisance. The baking became limited to a case-by-case basis. Me and my husband, we just really didn't need to be eating that much bread all the time. We learned to eat less of it to take the edge off of the amount of time I was spending making it. Even though making bread itself is not a difficult task for me, and oftentimes I could really just cheat by letting my bread maker or my KitchenAid stand mixer do most of the dough mixing, the truth was that I still needed to be home to finish baking it, to make sure that it was done. And I still needed to be able to slice it and freeze it. And all of this still takes some degree of time or a certain amount of time that you had to be home. I was still cooking breakfasts, lunches, and dinners between baking bread. I was still baking desserts. I was still making stuff outside of just the bread. I was still making my own cream, my own sauces, my own dressings, my own jams. I would spend an entire day off just in the kitchen and subsequent evenings after work preparing my food, just cutting vegetables, measuring things out, even just constant meal prep on all my days off. And eventually, I just wanted to stop spending my entire days doing all this hard work and just go bike riding. Just visit other humans, see other places. I still had to do practical things also, like cleaning the house.
Some of the best food I ever made came out of this experiment. However, unfortunately, this kind of cooking was just unsustainable. So eventually, I started finding methods and strategies to help me cook in a similar manner without burning myself out.